this? Do you think this would actually work, that this would incentivize less short-term thinking?
Yes and no. I mean, in general case, what we've actually seen is that there has been a movement, a movement of assets towards mutual funds, for example, that have a lower level of turnover. So investors are sensitive to the capital gains tax rates, and what you've seen is the money is flowing down. In general, you've seen turnover decline. Nevertheless, when we talk about, these evil short-termists, they're defined as people holding it for under a year.
Right.
And the average turnover of a ma-and-pa, grandpa mutual fund is 61%. So 61% of all the assets are sold annually. So what you're saying is that really the U.S. mutual fund industry are people who should be taxed more quickly. Now, obviously, if they're held in your IRA, the taxes don't apply there.
Sure.
But in the general case, how is it that one determines that magically at 366 days, you've now become a good person, or maybe she's going to extend that to a year and a half or whatever? It hasn't been shown to really impact economic activity, but it has shown to change where people allocate their assets. So you tax people enough, you hurt returns. And therefore, shareholders hold it for longer. Mutual funds hold it for longer, for example.
So you think it might not be good for ma-and-pa investors. It might be good, though, for the likes of some of the longer-term institutional investors, maybe CalPERS, institutions that are already taking more of a 3 to 5+ year.
Well, but then, they're already playing the short-term capital gain, so it really won't help them in any way. All it is punitive, but with no particular incentive towards growth. And if you look at all of this package, it's very similar to what you're seeing in the big divide politically between the two parties.
Yeah.
The GOP candidates are all focused on growth. This is more about redistribution and the notion that somehow short-term capitalism, what she loves to call quarterly capitalism,
yes.
Quarterly capitalism is somehow harming the little guy.
Well, I mean, there is an argument to be made. I was at Gabelli earlier this week doing a conference on shareholder activism. I mean, there is an argument to make that in the current environment, there is incentivized short-termism in the sense of what you're seeing is a lot of corporations, instead of investing in long-term future, they're doing share buybacks. Well, paying out dividends.
This is, and without getting inside academic baseball, there is a very simple theory by also a Nobel Prize winner, a guy named Modigliani and Miller. Basically, if you have cash on hand, that cash should, and you're a corporation, you should hold it and invest it yourself if you have better uses for it than your investors. If the investors have better uses for it, give it back to them. The worst still is just simply sitting on cash with nothing to do with it and no particular plans for it going forwards. At that point, you as a corporate manager actually should be obligated, or should feel some sense of obligation, to actually give it back to the investors, and they can do with it what they want. So it's not clear to me that a share buyback, unless it's manipulative for EPS or things like that,
I guess the issue arises with whether or not you think the board has a better idea of what to do with their cash, or whether or not an activist coming in from the outside has a better idea. Do you think that this message that we're hearing Secretary Clinton start to push about shareholder activism, I believe she's calling them hit-and-run activists, do you think that's going to gain a lot of traction?
I think it's populist noise to some very large degree. There are 8,000 mutual funds, hedge funds in America. There are 71 activist funds. It's about $140 billion. I mean, this is not what's causing America's productivity to be altered. This is not what's causing American competitiveness to be where it is. These are 71 men and women beating on people. In general, yes, have there been some occasional sort of pump and dump type, short-term things? Some, but for every one that you can name that does that, there are dozens of legitimate corporate boards that needed to have things pushed in a way that their own internal board was not willing to do. And that's what the activists do. It's going to be hard for her to differentiate, the white hats and the black hats among corporate
Just
activists.
very quickly, do you think that there's any sort of regulatory response or mechanism that could actually incentivize more long-termism, a la what Larry Fink is talking about?
Yes, you could do two things if you wanted to. One is, three things probably. One is compensate managers over a minimum of a 3-year cycle, so they're not paid on the quarter. The second thing you could do is stagger boards. If you really want to do this, if you really want to go down this road, make it so that the boards are not as subject to short-term pressures from shareholders. Of course, then you're also going to lose good shareholders. The white hat shareholders won't have their voice heard either. But if you want to go down that road, you can. And third, and most controversially, ultimately, you want to get rid of quarterly capitalism, get rid of quarterly earnings reports. Just don't allow quarterly earnings reports, but don't allow the forward-looking guidance that forms they beat, they didn't beat, they beat, they didn't beat, which is what half of this game is about. And if you did remove that, those three items would do it. Never going to happen. And 3-year lockup, giving tenure to boards, is that really healthy? You can do it.
Okay, so
I'm not sure it works.
restructure compensation, restructure boards.
Restructure boards.
Fabio, thank you so much for your time this morning. Fabio Savoldelli.